So what I'm planning on talking about today, I'll just introduce myself really briefly. I want to give sort of an overview on what really immigration law is all about. I know everybody knows something, some basics, but I want to just get it all out there, what is immigration law. And then I want to go more in depth on really how social workers, how mental health professionals can help me do my job and help me win cases, especially in immigration court. So that's the plan. So who am I? This is me. This is me in my office. You know, I'm a young attorney. I graduated in 2010. I opened my office in 2011. I speak Spanish. I speak Mandarin Chinese. So those are my two languages. And I'm very passionate about fighting for the rights of immigrants to avoid or prevent their deportation out of this country. I think immigration laws are not fair, okay? I think the whole concept of a border that is there to divide and exclude is not equal. It's not fair. It's not just, okay? So I am trying to advocate for people that are getting caught up in what I think is an unjust legal system. This is my team. We're a team of 7. Everybody on my team speaks English and Spanish at least. We also have English and we also have Portuguese, and then I'm the oddball that speaks Chinese. My wife is Chinese. I lived in China for a while, so I catered to that community as well. I was at a Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning, which is one of the reasons that I wore a suit today. But anyway, so immigration law overview. All right, so really, what do immigration lawyers do? It's a lot simpler than people like to make it sound. Really, we do 2 things. We help people immigrate to the United States from overseas, and we help people stay in the United States once they're here. All right, if you break it down, that's what we do. How do we do it is where it starts to get complex. We really do it through visas, and we'll talk about each of these in more detail, green cards, asylum, U.S. citizenship, removal defense, and I list other random things that all immigration lawyers have to juggle in order to manage those 5. Okay? So we're going to look at each of these in more detail right now. All right, so visas. What is a visa?
Permission to come here or stay here.
Awesome.
To another country.
Yeah, awesome. That's exactly right. So generally speaking, a visa is a document that goes in your passport that allows you to get on a plane and allows you to fly into a country to cross Customs and Border Patrol and to be admitted onto the soil of a different country. Okay, so how do you get one and which one is right for me? If somebody has a question like this, refer them to an immigration lawyer. All right, and here's why. These are the visas. Okay, A visas are for ambassadors and diplomats. B visas are your standard tourist visa for business or for pleasure, tourism. E visas for traders and investors. F visas are for students. G visas for international organizations. Everybody's heard of a H-1B. It's a subcategory of H visas for temporary employees, and on down the alphabet. There are lots of different types of visas. Each of these big categories has subcategories, right? And none of them are straightforward, cookie cutter. Each of these represents a legal fight to be fought to try to advocate for somebody's right to enter U.S. soil. Okay? All right. Which ones are mine? I do K visas, and by what I mean by mine, what my office does most frequently are K visas and U visas. K visas are for U.S. citizens who want to petition for fiancés. Okay, so a U.S. citizen can bring your fiancé over from overseas if you're planning to get married. If 1, you can show you have an intent to get married. 2, you're legally eligible for marriage, meaning both over 18, and mean any past marriage ended legally through death or divorce. And 3, you have to have met each other in person, no internet relationships. You have to actually have met each other in person sometime within the past 2 years. The harsh requirement is that when you arrive here, you have to get married within 90 days or it's no go. So you have to be ready. And if, anyway, whatever. I won't get too far into fiancé visas due to time, but we do a lot of these. The other one that we do a lot of are what are called U visas, and we're going to talk about U visas more in depth. U visas, I label the visa for victims, okay? It is for people who, one, are the victims of qualifying crimes here in the United States, two, who cooperate with law enforcement. They actually help the police in the investigation or the prosecution of that crime, and three, they have to suffer severe mental or physical abuse as a result of the crime that they suffered. This third element is where I need your help. Okay? All right. And I also do tourist visas. When people hire attorneys to do tourist visas, it's because they've tried at the consulate in Mexico, or they've tried at the consulate in fill-in-the-blank country, Costa Rica. We just won a weird tourist visa from Costa Rica. They've tried, they were denied. They tried again, they were denied. They tried again, they were denied. They have no clue how or why the U.S. government overseas is denying their mom's tourist visa or whatever it is. They eventually work their way into our office, and we go for it. And we put together a solid packet, and we just won one the other day from Costa Rica in that situation. Okay? So, but normally speaking, tourist visas, you can go on your own. All right. Those are visas. That's pretty much all I'm going to say about visas. Are there any questions about visas before I move on to green cards?
You mentioned the visa U, in Spanish they call it
Yep.
visa U.
La visa U.
And I think a lot of some of the clients that we see have some questions about those.
We have like 5 slides dedicated to U visas in about 30 minutes, or maybe less.
You said that's all we're going to say about
That's all I'm going to say about visas generally, but we'll come back to, I've got a whole section on U visas.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So the second sort of basic topic for immigration law, the second thing that we do, right, are green cards. So what are green cards? So who knows what a green card is? Imas, what would you say a green card is?
Well, it's no longer green.
Well, yes, that's
my green card. It was. It's just the permission to stay here permanently.
That's right.
But not as a citizen.
A
little bit more security, but not the full security of a citizenship.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So when I showed that big list of all the visas, each one of those has its own specific requirements and its own, they're all temporary, right? They are all giving you just temporary permission to enter the U.S. for that specific purpose. So green cards are much better. Where visas are temporary, green cards are permanent. Where visas are limited by either, student visas, you're not allowed to work, generally. Tourist visas, you're not allowed to study. Each visa category is limited by law to what activities the person can engage in. A green card is basically limitless with a few exceptions. You can't vote in elections because you're not a U.S. citizen. You can't take public office. You can't be the president. You can't serve on a jury. That's basically your limits. Other than that, you're free to live, thrive, survive in the United States as any permanent resident of the U.S. Okay? So how do you get it? There's 4 ways to be eligible for a green card. The first is based on a family-based petition. So your spouse, your parent, your child, if your child's over 21 and is a U.S. citizen, they can file a petition for you. There's a petitioning process. The second is an employment-based petition. So for certain, high up software engineers that are eligible for their employers to petition for them, they can get a green card that way. The third is through what's called VAWA, which we won't be talking about too much on the slides unless people have specific questions about VAWA. But VAWA for victims of domestic violence can actually, there's a way to self-petition. You don't have to depend on the petition. If your petitioner were an abusive spouse, for example, you can petition yourself.
Are you going to address the benefits of the U visa over VAWA when you get to the U visas?
Now, I didn't prepare anything specifically on that, but I certainly will.
Because when you and I had this conversation, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
That the U visa is able to kind of work through some obstacles that the person may have, either their legal history and so forth, that VAWA doesn't.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. I was not aware of that.
Yes.
Is also something about VAWA is that you have to be, if it's if the person is abusive, you have to be married.
Yes, the abuse
Right.
has to happen during the marriage.
Right.
It has to be married to a U.S. citizen or a green card holder.
Right.
They have to be a U.S. citizen or a green card holder during the marriage. There's all kinds of limits on who's eligible for VAWA. Plus, what Mr. Moncada is talking about, VAWA came first, U visas came second. U visas have wider waivers. Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about waiver cases in this presentation, but I'll just say it straight up. I have a client, for example, that won VAWA through a very good and very reputable nonprofit agency that helped them out here in San Francisco. Okay, but she won VAWA. She won. Okay, this is gonna be more confusing than it's worth. She won VAWA, but she'll never be eligible for a green card. Okay, she won VAWA as deferred action, but she'll never be eligible for this purpose because of her immigration sins in the past. Okay, if she applies for a U visa, which now she's hired me, that even though she's already got VAWA, I'm now reapplying for a U visa because the U visa can fix the problems in her immigration past more than VAWA ever could. Okay, and I'm not going to get too much more complicated or too much more into it than that, mainly for time constraints, but that's the issue. U visas, generally speaking, are better than VAWA in most instances if you can get the certification of the police saying that you were helpful. If you can't do that, VAWA has the advantage because you can apply for VAWA with or without helping the police, with or without a police report. You know, if you didn't want to call the cops on your husband, then you could still be eligible for VAWA. Anyway, I'm going to move past that. The fourth way to get a green card is through asylum. Okay, so asylees, after 1 year in asylum status, are eligible to file a petition on them by themselves for adjustment of status for their green card. Okay, and I think that's all I wanted to say about green cards, except this. So the Defense of Marriage Act was overturned finally last summer by the U.S. Supreme Court. So after that happened, for the first time in U.S. history, same-sex visa petitions were now approvable at law, okay? Which means same-sex visa petitions, green card petitions, and yes, fiancé visas are now approvable for the first time in U.S. history. And my office, actually, we just won one. Well, we haven't won it yet because we haven't got the green card in the mail yet, but I had an interview on a same-sex petition on Monday of this week, and I'm anticipating a grant, right? And so it's good to keep it on the radar. All right, so visas, green cards. Number 3 is asylum. So what is asylum? Augusta, what is asylum?
That's being allowed to be in the United States because of persecution faced in the country of origin.
Exactly.
Political beliefs, representing a religious group, sexual minorities.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So the word asylum means protection. Okay? The idea is you, as a government, you are not allowed to deport someone if they are facing serious danger to themselves in their home country. Okay? So what do you need to show to win an asylum case? You have to show you have a quote-unquote well-founded fear of quote-unquote persecution on account of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or your quote-unquote membership in a particular social group. Okay? You have to show that the persecution that you are fearing fits under the asylum definition, and if it does, you win, and if it doesn't, you get ordered deported. Okay? So there's risk with filing for asylum. Also, you have to submit your application within 1 year of your entry to the United States. And there are lots of other bars, but I'm not going to talk about those today. The 1-year bar is where I need your help, because everybody overstays the 1-year bar because nobody knows that they need to file for asylum within 1 year of their arrival. And so there's ways to get around the 1-year bar, and we need exceptions, and we need to think outside the box and get creative to explain why they couldn't file on time, and a psychological evaluation can go a long way in helping that. All right? So that's asylum. U.S. citizenship is the fourth thing we do. We're not going to talk about that too much right now, but who can apply? Basically, if you have a valid green card for 5 years, and I put an asterisk here because it's 3 if you're married, and it's 4 if you got it through asylum. 3 if you got your green card through marriage to a U.S. citizen, 4 if you got your green card through asylum, 5 if you got your green card through any other way. Okay? You have to take and pass a citizenship test, you have to have good moral character, have to speak basic English, have to swear loyalty to the U.S., and there's a bunch of physical presence requirements. Basically, you have to have been living in the United States during the whole time you've had your green card. Okay, more or less. No serious long trips outside the U.S. Okay? All right.
Before you go
yes.
to the next slide.
Okay.
So, I didn't see any slides talking about refugees.
So, good distinction. The distinction between an asylee and a refugee is one of semantics. Okay? So when we talk about refugees, really people that win refugee status, when we use that term, when the Immigration and Nationality Act uses that term, they're meaning people that are recognized as refugees from overseas even before they arrive on U.S. soil. They've already gone through some sort of a adjudication process. But essentially, the term asylum might be more broadly defined as asylees, refugees, people that have won what's called withholding of removal, people that have won deferred action under the Convention Against Torture. There's more to it than just what I mentioned, but generally speaking, those that are seeking relief based on fear of harm in their country, they're all on that previous slide. Okay, they had to have shown, even a refugee, they had to have shown that they had a well-founded fear of persecution on account of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, etc. Okay, great. So, yeah, so this is U.S. citizenship. Okay, so then the fifth, and what I really love and hate doing is removal defense. I say I love it because I love to win it. I hate it because I hate to lose it. What is removal defense? Listen, lawyers love to make it sound incredibly complicated. The way to simplify it as easily as possible is that removal defense is only...
A lot of people.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, it's a lot of people. Removal defense is only you in front of an immigration judge arguing that you're eligible for one of the 4 things we've already talked about. You're in front of a judge arguing you're eligible for a visa, you're eligible for a green card, you're eligible for asylum, you're eligible as a U.S. citizen. If you can show any of those, in other words, that you have a legal, valid reason to be on U.S. soil, if you can show that in immigration court, then you get to stay here, and if you can't, you'll be ordered deported. Okay? The U.S. government is deporting more people annually than they ever have in U.S. history. Let me see if I have the graph. Shoot, I have this great graph that shows this, and then, and the part where it starts to go up and up and up is September 1, 9/11, right? So, go figure. Right? After terrorists attack, then we try to deport everybody. And it's sort of the truth. All right. So,
you know, I just read a report 2 days ago, and also in the report, Pew was saying that in the last few years, everybody that's deported on the border is registered. And in the past, they did it.
yeah.
And so now it's kind of interesting because then the number of deportations are greater than before because most of them happen in the border,
Mhm.
they're registered.
That's true. It's a process that was created. It was actually created in 1996, and it's called expedited removal. And they can deport people immediately when they're coming in with either false documents or no documents. Yep. It's a nasty, nasty process, and as a result, the border is becoming more dangerous. It's becoming more sort of militarized. It's becoming nasty. So anyway, those are the sort of 5 big things that all immigration lawyers do. There are some smaller things that now immigration lawyers are doing as well to help their clients, or to really, they kind of fit into the puzzle, right? So partially, I think, to succumb to some political pressure, Obama passed the Deferred Action Program the summer of 2012, DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So now, for the first time, really, thanks to the President and his cabinet, youth who arrived before they were 16, who've lived in the U.S. for at least the past 5 years, who are in school or who graduated from high school, and who have no criminal, gang, or bad history whatsoever, and who are 30 years old or less as of the 15th of June of 2012, they can be eligible for a work authorization. It's not a visa, it's not a green card, it's a separate thing. It's deferred action status, right? So eligible for work authorization and a driver's license, social security card, documents that they've never been eligible for. Okay, so we do that. My office does a lot of that. We do work authorization if you're visa status, or if you're deferred action status, or whatever allows you to get it. We help people get that. We do FOIA requests, FBI background checks, Department of Justice background checks. We do those. FOIA stands for the Freedom of Information Act. What immigration lawyers use this for, it's the tool, right? It's the tool that we use to request from the government everything that the government has on your file, right? So we ask that right when the client signs up. It takes about 9 months before we even see the thing, right? But we can see deportations in the past. We can see applications that have been submitted in the past. It's a way for us to do our due diligence, to know what our client, to know whether or not our client has forgotten that one time that they were caught, crossing the border, because we don't want to submit something and then and trigger something that we didn't know was on the radar. So this is a very important piece of what we do. Prosecutorial discretion, basically, if your client is not eligible for anything, as a last-ditch effort, you can ask the powers that be in their divine discretion to please don't deport my client. And this is what's called prosecutorial discretion. You ask them to not, ask them to basically not execute. Even though they're eligible to deport your client, you ask them not to.
Does that work?
Well,
Does it work?
it works in certain instances.
Yeah.
I mean, the times where it works are the times you read about in the paper. ICE gave a stay of deportation in the case where it's the one younger sister of the family that has been a great student, and everybody was rallying around them, and yeah, she didn't have legal papers, but she's never done anything wrong. She's a great person. There's ways to put political pressure and to get prosecutorial discretion.
Now, what about people that have mental health issues? That's the part where it helps.
So
Who can document mental health issues?
yeah, I mean, if
People.
yes, so there's all kinds of. There are arguments there as to why they should get prosecutorial discretion, of course. There are also arguments as to why they're not competent to be even in deportation proceedings to begin with. And so there are ways to argue for folks that, if the law says that if you can't understand what is going on around you, then due process can't allow you, to be basically have your life, liberty, or property taken away. You can't do those things without due process of law. So it depends on the level of mental illness, I guess. But I have a client who came in her mom came into my office in tears 2 weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, because her son, who is schizophrenic and bipolar, was deported in January, despite the fact that he's schizophrenic and bipolar, and despite the fact that he has huge amounts of meds that he needs to be taking, and despite the fact that he has no one in Mexico that can take care of him, and so now he's on the street homeless in Mexico, hardly knows what he's doing or where he is, and can't get access to his meds, you know? So the fact that you have a mental illness doesn't mean ICE won't deport you. They'll just try to deport you faster so that they don't have to document why they shouldn't even have arrested you in the first place. I'm calling the ACLU on that particular case, though, because that's kind of a flagrant violation of the law. So, but it happens. Okay. So, bond hearings, if somebody's detained by ICE, I can get them out. Okay, not all the time, but it depends on why they were detained. If they have a serious criminal history, then maybe they're not eligible for bond. But if they're detained by ICE, have them call a lawyer and let's get them out of there, okay? And then we can help employers, anyway, these are just some of the other things we do. We can help employers comply with their I-9 requirements. Whatever, I don't like I-9. Are there any questions about these things? Okay, so that is sort of my general overview on the big scope of immigration law. Are there any questions before I move on?
Just a quick question, and this might be more of kind of like your opinion, but
yeah,
you know, DACA.
Yeah.
What's the prospect looks like? And what does it look like for in the future?
It's such a big question mark. I mean, they have said that they're going to renew DACA for those that applied. It's a 2-year thing. So those that applied in 2012, they're going to be up for renewal here in 2014, right? And because it started in June of 2012. So, so that's good. The thing is that generally speaking, when the government grants a program to a group of people, it is easier for the next president to stop granting it than it is for the next president to take it away, to take it back. I think there would be a lot of political pressure, in other words, if a next president wanted to be a total jerk and wanted to deport all those kids. If that happened, there would be a lot of jumping up and down and screaming. Yep. So you know, basically any client that's coming to me right now and is eligible for DACA, I say, whoa, let's get this application in before Mr. Obama leaves the White House. Because you want to have a social, you want to have a work authorization, you want to have your driver's license, you want to have those basic documentation just for the future. You know what I mean? I mean,
it's also very limited.
That's totally limited.
Yeah, because I have a client that decided to go with DACA instead of asylum.
That's an interesting choice.
Dumb choice.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. Because now he's graduated from college and he wants to go to grad school, but he's not eligible for any loans.
Oh, interesting. You think he has an asylum case?
He totally had an asylum case. I still have the draft of my report for the asylum.
Oh.
But he decided to go with DACA.
With DACA, well, I'd still take that case. So here's what he could know. Here's what he could know. For the 1-year bar, what you're saying is, maybe he's waited too long now because there's a 1-year filing deadline and now he has DACA.
He didn't even have that bar.
He didn't have it before.
It was the family pressure.
Oh, I gotcha. He just is deciding not to.
He's gay, and the family doesn't want to know anything about him being gay. But since he was living here since he was 13, they said you can go for that and forget all the gay stuff. And now that he's trying to go to grad school, he can't get any student loans. And can't go because the grad school is $30,000-$40,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't it be argued that his parents made that decision, that he wasn't really knowledgeable to be able to say which one was better?
If he later decides to try for his asylum case, I am less worried about the time in his situation because, I mean, whatever. But whatever. If he has made up his mind, then he's made up his mind. And that is sad. Yeah, yeah. Keep trying. Keep trying. Keep trying. And if he's, anyway, just because he's decided to not do asylum now doesn't mean he couldn't still change his mind in the future. The fact that he has DACA, in my view of the law, buys him more time. And so he actually has more time to make up his mind. Okay?
Let him know that. Maybe that'll
Yep.
be a little-
Yep. In my view, it does. All right. So now we're going to talk about really the substance of why we're here. All right. So anyway, immigration law for social workers. There's a few things that I'm going to be addressing. So who are we helping? How? What ways can social workers help us? What types of cases need social workers help? When, at what point in the process, how is it best to work with the attorney, how to put together an awesome evaluation, how to testify in court. Anyway, we'll be addressing some of these topics. So who are we helping? You already all know this. We'll be very, very quick. We're helping immigrants, obviously. Most of our clients, I assume, are undocumented. So be conscientious of language issues, of course. Be conscientious if you're using interpreters, if they're not, if it's if they're not fluent Spanish, be conscientious if it's maybe a Quechua or a Mam speaker or something like that. Most of our clients obviously have extremely limited income. Be aware of country-sensitive issues. If a client is fleeing from, a war-torn or conflicted part of the world, it's good to research those issues before even meeting with the client. All of these things are obvious and you know them all. Okay, so how can you help? You can help by writing written evaluations, by doing detained clinical evaluations, by testifying in court, and by actually helping clients out get over the trauma or whatever it is that they have suffered from. This also is pretty straightforward.
What's a detained?
Yeah, Augusta is one person that I have hired to do a detained consultation with me, or a detained evaluation. They're behind bars. Yeah.
You could detain them in your office.
No, so imagine.
Do this assessment for you whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it is probably the worst setting to do an evaluation ever, but it is the, you get, one, there are very few people that do them, all right, and two, judges that are seeing detained cases hardly ever see the evaluations of mental health professionals, and so it is like, it's valuable. It's valuable. It's valuable to a case. It's valuable to the clients. Be open to it if you could. The problem is you have to drive out to Sacramento. You have to drive out to Richmond. These detention facilities are not anywhere.
With the ambience.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, you're in, you have to go through the security. You have to, it's all you're in the jail, But in the jail, 4 hours, scribbling down notes, handwritten, and do an evaluation. But it is incredibly helpful. All right. So
I have a comment before this slide.
okay.
Can you go back?
Of course.
I think that social workers also can help you to help the person to structure the plan and follow up on the plan.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So
I can't modify it.
clients,
I would.
they are not used to deal with the systems that are in this country, the way that you organize information, the way that you report on events, the way that you have to interact with agencies or people in positions of authority.
Uh-huh.
So social workers also can assist you in and help the person to follow the plan, to remind about appointments, yeah, and to even practice how to interact with the system or in the moment of having an interview.
I love it. I love it. That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And in other words, almost coach a client who is newly arrived on like how to struggle with issues of authority, right? How to maybe get emotionally, psychologically, whatever, prepared for facing confrontation in a courtroom, right? Which is a totally foreign setting for anybody, right? Yeah, those types of things can, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah, thank you for that.
Now in detention, I have had some clients that have been in detention, and also have been able to contact immigration services, and for 30 days they don't know where the person is.
Mm-hmm.
This is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have to deal with continuum of care, if they have prescription medications also, it's like the question is who's going to pay for the treatment and whether or not the person is in treatment or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 months later they can say, okay, he was not taking meds.
Mm-hmm.
Or this out already, we have deported already this person.
Yeah.
And my question is, well, this person has been in violation of universal rights, human rights, right?
Yeah.
So what can you do in that field?
Yeah, it's a pretty nasty situation to be in when anybody's detained. And yes, ICE is pretty ruthless about picking somebody up at 2 in the morning, you know, and then dragging them and shipping them off to Arizona or Tacoma or New Mexico or Texas or any one of the big detention centers if they want to deport them. And it's I mean, it's nasty. If they have an attorney that's already their attorney, which is rarely ever the case, usually nobody hires a lawyer until the bad thing happens, but if they have the sort of foresight and if they hire the lawyer first, then a lawyer with a signed notice of representation on file can call ICE immediately and ask where they are, where they're going to be, what bed they're going to be in, and we can fax requests for medicine, okay? And so there are ways that there are tools that I can use to fight for my clients. The problem is most people are trying to call me after they're in, and then I don't have their signature on the document. I have to drive out there to meet with them first. It becomes a big hassle. But even in that situation, yeah, there's a delay, but as soon as they really do, if they do have a case, if they do want to really like hire someone like me to help them, we can get proof of their meds, you know, and a you know, request that a doctor inside the detention facility go visit them immediately, you know.
So there's another role then for social workers, because then the person is engaged in a care plan. So probably if we are coordinating care, probably we have in file authorization or waiver for confidentiality, so we could assist in the continuum of care.
That's good. That's good. The problem is that I just know for a fact that so ICE, they have one form that and it's called the G28. It's a blue form. They want one signature on that form, and that shows that you're the attorney on that case. And if you've got that form on file, then you have access.
Yeah, and your
Most
site.
people don't.
Most people don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, when anybody hires my office, we sign 2 or 3 right then and there because we want, you know.
So this is
yeah.
on your side of the legal.
Exactly.
But now in the medical, psychiatric, or mental health, we have another tool that can assist you too.
Great. Yeah, I mean, the authorization that you're saying is incredibly important and helpful for someone like me from, on my side. Yeah, exactly. If I can be in touch with you about the case, then boom, hey, fax over this, let's get it to immigration. You know, we can work together to really move on a case. Yes, exactly. Yep. Cool. Okay. So now comes the types of cases that we're going to talk about much more in depth right now. So asylum, U visas, and waiver cases. Really, cancellation of removal is a type of waiver case, and I'm not going to really talk about too much other due to time. Unless there's questions. We can always ask questions as we go through. So asylum, again, to win asylum, this is the exact same slide we looked at earlier. You have to have a well-founded fear of persecution on account of one of the 5 protected grounds. and you have to be beware of the bars, mainly the one-year filing deadline. So the need for social workers in asylum cases, and this is one, there's a second slide as well, so this is the first slide of it, is the showing of the effects of persecution. So, for example, if a client is uneasy about testifying, an evaluation can help explain that they're traumatized or harmed, right? Can help them explain that they actually were the victim of persecution. For example, imagine Juan was gang raped by the police in his country, and so now every time that he's about to testify about it, he freezes up. He can't articulate it. His mind goes blank because he can't remember the event and he can't articulate anything. Well, in that type of situation, it's a problem in court, or it's a problem in the interview, because the officer needs to get his evidence. What happened, right? But the evaluation from somebody that can really sit down and listen can go a long way to explain really what the deal is, right? So that's showing the effects of persecution, which is sort of the first element of any asylum claim. The second big need for evaluations is to try and overcome this one-year filing deadline. Okay, I already mentioned this before, but the one-year filing deadline is, I think, ridiculous. It's harsh. But there is an exception if you can show that there were extraordinary circumstances that caused your delay. Okay, and judges have a lot of leeway on evaluating whether or not the particular circumstances in your case constitute quote-unquote extraordinary circumstances that caused your delay. Okay? So some judges will consider PTSD as an extraordinary circumstance, and if there are other, you know, even, I mean, I would say severe depression, I would say, you know, severe fill in the blank. A severe evaluation, if it's severe enough that you can actually show and write that in your opinion this person was unable to really address these issues before, then, you know, we can show that to a judge and we can get it.
Panic attacks.
Panic attacks. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Paranoia. Yeah, all of this. Yeah.
I wonder if this is a special, extraordinary circumstances, is that if the person is unable to be aware, but also unable to be engaged.
Yes.
So let's say that immigrants, they come, they go to work, and more likely to go and hide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we could show that, and then in the narrative, yeah, that they have fear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The thing that I would be weary of there is that a good judge will go for it. A bad judge will say, wait, every undocumented person in the whole country is, by the fact that they're undocumented, hiding from authorities and hiding from the law and things like that. So I would just say maybe, you know, on a case-by-case basis, something like that is right.
I've made several reports with that argument that
okay.
have been successful, and what I focus on is the idiosyncratic characteristics of the behavior. You know, so for example, somebody who didn't fully accept their homosexuality gets here, and it's terrifying for them. So what they do is they just kind of basically do what they need to do, go to work, stay with their family, hide not only from authority but from themselves and from the community and so forth and so on. But then over time, when they begin to overcome that, either because they've entered therapy or they've entered a support group that, you know, somehow they got the courage to do and so forth. And I point out the idiosyncratic, you know, specific evolution, if you will, of this person's life. That's how I've been able to make that argument.
That's great.
And then all of a sudden now they're able, they're connected, they're knowledgeable, they're willing, they have the support system, they accept themselves, they're able to step out of that shell they created for themselves.
Awesome. Awesome. That makes sense.
What about the language?
Yeah.
So let's say that we have seen in San Francisco people that come from Yucatan or Guatemala, and there are Mayas. The primary language is Maya, and then they're limited in Spanish, and they can speak English. And it takes years to manage some words in English. So it can be an argument too.
It can. It's an argument, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So
can it be an element of an argument?
Yes, of course.
Explaining the developmental process of the person engaging in the big picture.
Right,
Okay.
right. The way this works, generally speaking, so what's a good example of an extraordinary circumstance? It is like, so the classic example is you arrive in January 1st of 2013, and on on December 30th of 2013, you haven't hit the 1 year bar yet, and you're ready to file that case, but your father passes away right then, something like that. And so now the law says you still had to file within that 1 year. But if you have a reason why the death of your father might have triggered some relapse or some issue with who you are, what the law will give you is they will give you 6 months from the date of that triggering event to file your case only. And if you file it then, it's got to be 6 months within some extraordinary circumstance that you can file. And if the extraordinary circumstance is, gosh, what's a way to think about it? So we had one client where we argued that a miscarriage constituted an extraordinary circumstance because she had been the victim of domestic violence for years, and she had children with a previous husband that was horribly abusive to her for years, and now with her sort of nicer, good guy husband, she's unable to have a child. And so we argued that that sort of prompted like a renewed fear, I guess, in her returning back to her own country and facing the horrible abuse that she was in before. So whatever. I mean, it's not anything that's easy to win. I guess the point is, if you're working with an attorney on a case, talk to that attorney about the specific circumstance that attorney is thinking of making the argument. What is that argument? And if the attorney doesn't know of one, then maybe the evaluation that you're doing could help find one. You know what I mean? You will know more from the client than oftentimes the attorney can know, which is important. Okay? All right, so the second big thing, the second slide, the third big thing in asylum cases is, look, everybody applies for asylum, right? Everybody applies for asylum, and lots of people lie when they apply for asylum. They do it to try and gain access to the U.S., right? And they do it in fear, quite frankly, because they don't want to be deported, right? So credibility and being honest is almost... It's so strict now, the law, on credibility determinations, that they can deny an asylum claim that is 100% honest if there are like 3 things that are inconsistent, even that have nothing to do with the heart of your case, right? Anyway, so credibility is huge. Psychological evaluations can help show a judge or an adjudicator that your client's testimony is credible, that your client is being honest. For example, you can show, that the mannerisms of the client are consistent with somebody who's normally diagnosed with X, Y, and Z, maybe with PTSD. Or you could show, for example, that the dreams that the client is saying that they are experiencing now are typical among survivors of serious domestic violence, or typical among survivors of crazy war induced parts of the world, or something like that. Like, there are ways that an evaluation can help build the credibility of the client's story.
You know, one thing, I mean, from my perspective, and I just had a conversation with another lawyer about this, is that statements like that almost beg for us to be in the expert, role. And I felt uncomfortable. Maybe her questions were too far out of what I knew.
Yeah.
But I told her I can't tell you about this person's symptoms.
Yeah.
And I can back it up with documentation, DSM classifications, and so forth, but not as a blanket typical of a person, survivor of domestic violence. Because then that's, like if I do get called to testify, then am I an expert witness?
Yeah, I mean, so you'd be surprised. Actually, you probably could very much, as if you're licensed, and if you have years of experience, like I know you've had years of experience, you could very well be an expert witness in the San Francisco Immigration Court, absolutely. But, the fact that you are expressing a little bit of hesitancy to make a claim like this, don't make this specific claim, but the fact that you're pulling out the DSM-4 or whatever it is now, and 5, and the fact that you are pointing out the specific characteristics of whatever diagnosis this person may or may not have, I mean, that gives you expertise. The judge doesn't know any of this stuff, I mean, yeah, they've heard the terms, but
that's actually what happened. During a phone, I was called on the phone, and I was asked exactly that, like, where did you get this?
Yeah.
And I told them, and I read it off the DSM, and it was exactly what I put down in the.
That's.
They good. Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One of the things, just to comment about that, one of the things that I've been asked when I've written letters for clients is, and work with lawyers, and they ask me to send them also my resume, and so usually with that, I have never been called to to testify in court, but usually when they see my experience with with mental health and domestic violence and all that, then that has been enough to, I guess, to show the judge that I have expertise and to be able to write those kinds of opinions.
Yep, awesome. Resumes are huge. Okay, so those are the 3 big issues with asylum claims that I think you can really help fill in the puzzle. How are we for time? It's almost, well, whatever, we're okay. So U visas. I do want to talk about U visas. So U visas are the visa for victims, right? To be eligible for it, you have to be the victim of a quote-unquote qualifying crime here in the U.S., and there's this big list, and I hope I have it on the next slide. I think I do. You also, so you have to be a victim of a qualifying crime. You have to, quote-unquote, be helpful in the investigation or the prosecution of the crime. So you have to call the police, do a police report. If the police want to prosecute, they can ask you to be a witness. You've got to cooperate. You have to possess information about the crime. And then you have to suffer, quote-unquote, substantial physical or mental abuse through your victimization of that crime. You also have to be admissible. We're not going to get into that. So this is really where the arguments and where the evaluations and where the paperwork can help, right? The evaluation. All right, so the point is to protect immigrants who have the courage to come forward and to report and assist in the prosecution of crimes, right? The reason that law enforcement officials like U visas is because they want to be able to enhance the police's efforts or their ability to investigate and to prosecute crimes, right? So it's a carrot and stick approach. You give the carrot to the victim who is willing to testify by giving them a visa, and then it allows the police to go into the same community and to arrest whoever it was that was guilty, right? Let me see here. All right, so this is the list of the qualifying crimes, okay? I'll just read it really fast. Abduction, abusive sexual contact, blackmail, domestic violence, extortion, female genital mutilation, felonious assault, hostage, incest, involuntary servitude, kidnapping, manslaughter, murder, obstruction of justice, peonage, perjury, prostitution, rape, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, slave trade, there's an extra R there, torture, trafficking, witness tampering, unlawful criminal restraint, attempt conspiracy or solicitation of any of those, and other related crimes. It's a long list, but you could notice if you were in law school, in criminal law 101 or whatever, you would notice the crimes that are not on this list. For example, robbery is nowhere on here. If you were the victim of a robbery, you're not eligible for a U visa, right? Unless there was unless you were, yes, if there was an assault, then okay, then maybe you're in U visa category. The other thing is, let's point out two of them that I see over and over again. Domestic violence as one term versus felonious assault as another term. If you were assaulted, attacked, mugged, walking down the street, you've got to show that that assault amounted to a felony, right? You have to show that that assault was so strong, so severe, that that the person would serve over a year in prison if convicted. Versus domestic violence could be misdemeanor domestic violence. It doesn't have to be felonious, in other words. Anyway, so
I wanted to ask one more thing.
Yep.
About the trafficking. Isn't there a trafficking visa right
yeah,
now?
there is a T visa. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's okay.
That's true. It's got slightly different requirements, but yes, they do a double whammy. If you're the victim of human trafficking, you can be eligible for all kinds of things. Yep.
Yeah, another crime that I see that I think the folks we work with face a lot is basically doing work and not getting paid, getting
Yeah,
stiff.
peonage.
And it's peonage.
Oh, that's
Okay.
Peonage. It's also slave trade, you know.
Is that considered underslaved, even though they weren't technically enslaved? They went to a work site.
So, well, so let me tell you the example that I won based on slavery. Okay, so client is from the Philippines, and he gets a visa from. Well, he first comes over on a tourist visa. He gets a job working as a healthcare professional. He's a nurse in the Philippines. He is working with Alzheimer's patients, people that are suffering of dementia, okay? His boss says, okay, great, you're working for me, and I'm going to sponsor your work visa while you're here so that you can stay here, okay? The boss later never submits the application for the visa, okay? Stops to pay him, allows his visa to expire, says that if he calls the cops or the authorities that he has now overstayed his visa and he's now deportable, and forces him to continue working as a nurse to taking care of patients with dementia around the clock until he... It's slavery, right? It's slavery. And no pay. No pay. 4 years. 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, now his bosses are being indicted and they're going to be serving time in federal prison. So, right. But we're getting a U visa, right? Yeah.
What about in the, it says incest there?
Yeah.
In the cases of when I saw a woman who was now an adult, but as a child, her stepfather. And so I think there was a police report made later when she became an adult. Could she file for a U visa?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes. So, very cool thing about U visas. If bad things happened 10 years ago, some people say, oh, it's too late. You know, not so. A U visa can, as long as there's a police report that was made,
Then.
well, as long as there has ever been a police report made, and if we can get the police to sign off saying that they were helpful to them in the investigation or prosecution, we can file a U visa. I don't care when it happened. Yep.
I don't know how far this case went. I stopped working with the family, but the daughter of an undocumented father was sexually molested. And the lawyer was going to try to get a U visa for the father. That's been done?
Yep, I am currently working on like 3 of these, yes. Yes. If, as long as the daughter is under 18,
Yeah.
they can file U visas for not just the parents,
Like the family.
siblings. Yes, we can. U visas are awesome that way. And so the other cool thing is that, oh man, my client was just the victim of some crazy assault. He's been married to, but not legally married to his wife for years, right? Get married. Get married today. We'll file the visa tomorrow. We'll get visas ×2
For the spouse.
for the spouse.
Yeah.
Yep. Work with a lawyer that's done them, because the strategy with U visas is great. You can, yeah, it's awesome.
And I think for those of us who work child abuse cases, it's
Yep.
really good to remember that the parents may not have been the direct victims, but if
But
their
they
children
will.
are under 18, they
Yeah.
can get a U visa.
Yeah, and think about this. The child's the victim, but the child was born here. They're a U.S. citizen. They don't need a visa. They don't need anything with immigration law. But the parents are undocumented. We can do it. We can do it. It's not easy to do it, but we can do it. Okay? All right. All right, so the showing of substantial abuse. How do we do this, right? Your victim must have suffered substantial physical or mental abuse. So the evaluation needs to explain the nature of the injury, the severity of the criminal acts that happened, the severity of the harm that the person actually suffered, the duration of the harm that was felt, any permanent, serious, or lasting harm or effect, right? This is such a important piece in the putting together of the visa. The cool thing about visas is there's no court, right? There's no officer. There's no interview. There's nothing. You submit a packet that's about this thick off to some service center in Vermont, and they take it and they sit on it for a year, and then some officer looks at it, and then they decide whether or not they're going to give it to you or not.
Well, you're absolutely right in terms of the
Not having to
process.
go.
Yeah.
But there is a court. I have 2 or 3 cases that are being stalled right now
Mm-hmm.
because the officer of the DA won't sign off on it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So
That's true.
They're court and jury,
Mm-hmm.
which is like,
Well, yeah. No, those guys, yeah. First step in any U visa is asking either the police or the DA or whoever the prosecutor was to certify that you were helpful
yeah.
to
And
them.
then they-
And if they don't, they have all the power in the world. Yeah,
And they-
that's the limitation of a U
So,
visa.
yeah.
Yep, that's true.
On
That
the
is
other
true.
hand, it's not like somebody who has suffered very bad PTSD, of a lot of trauma, and has to go in front of a...
Yes, exactly.
and-
That's
and
what
be
I mean. Yeah.
questioned and have to
And the social worker will
over-
never have to be in court on these.
over and
Yep.
over again, when sometimes they can't talk to these, traumatic events that have happened.
Yeah,
Yep.
but they're in my office, they're having
Yeah.
the PTSD, and then now they're angry because the
Yeah, it's
police
not
officer
working.
won't
It
sign.
won't
Yeah.
sign,
Or
yeah,
the DA won't sign it.
yeah.
And then
Yep.
there was a case I worked with Sylvia, and then came over here through Access, and he got shot in the gut 3 times, and they never signed.
Mm-hmm.
He tried for like almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's horrible.
It was like,
Mm-hmm. Some police departments are better than others. Some DAs are better than others. It's
Orange County.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one that was denied in Concord just this
Oh,
week,
yeah.
and it's just like, gosh, so
Oh,
frustrating.
geez.
It's so frustrating,
Yeah.
you know. All right, so that's U visas. Okay, so the last sort of category of cases are waiver cases. Waiver cases are a little bit complex. Are we up for going for them?
I'm gonna have to leave a little bit early, I apologize.
Okay, no problem. It might be a good time to grab a cup of coffee.
No, I'll still,
Okay, well, I can plow through them too if I want to respect your time for sure.
no,
So here's the example, all right? So Carlos arrived from Honduras 6 years ago. He entered the country without permission. He later fell in love with Susan, who's a U.S. citizen. After 4 years of dating, they just married. They're planning to start a family in the next few years. Susan files a petition for Carlos's green card, okay? A family-based green card petition, no problem, right? He's not eligible for a green card, okay? He's not because he entered without permission, okay? The idea is, in certain instances, we have to ask the government to forgive us for our immigration sins. We have to ask the government to quote-unquote waive unlawful presence or some other immigration sins that have happened in the past. So this is what becomes a waiver case. To win a waiver, he has to show that Susan, his United States citizen wife, would suffer quote-unquote extreme hardship if he were not granted the waiver. In other words, if he were to have to wait in his home country for 10 years before the time would normally allow him to re-enter the U.S. or reapply for a visa. Are you with me? All right. Here's the basics in the law. Okay, I didn't cover this in the first intro, but this is the way it works. Some immigration sins make you quote-unquote inadmissible, which means ineligible for that visa in your passport. Some immigration sins make you quote-unquote deportable, which means they can arrest you and take you home. Okay? All right. So some grounds of inadmissibility or deportability are waivable if you meet certain requirements. Some are not. Often, if you can show quote-unquote exceptional hardship to a U.S. citizen or green card holding spouse, parent, or child, then often you can ask the government to waive whatever thing has made you inadmissible. That was my brother. Okay. Yes?
My understanding is if you write down, even if the person was involved with survival sex, anything involving sex work is the kiss of death.
That's inadmissible.
Yeah, so...
And so you don't,
Wow.
you have to...
Sex work, drugs, if you admit to being even in their simple possession of more than 30 grams of marijuana, you're inadmissible for life, right? If you've ever helped your little brother cross the border without permission, you paid for that coyote to bring him across, you're inadmissible for life. You need a waiver, or you're never going to be eligible for a green card. Okay? So there's a lot of immigration violations. They're violation and crimes,
Sex
of
work
course.
is inadmissible?
Oh, they're
Yeah.
very,
So I was thinking-
I'm sorry, so sometimes
No,
you have
it's
someone
sex-
who's been traumatized
Yeah.
by working in survival sex.
Mhm.
He or she,
Yep.
has been beaten by
Yeah.
a pimp or whatever. And that is part of the trauma package,
yeah.
but you may choose not to present that component in the evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was
which is
thinking a lot of
unfortunate.
Mhm.
a lot of our transgender clients,
Mhm.
they have to resort to that.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, here in San Francisco, it's not as bad as other places, but the police, I mean, they did away with the 3 condom rule, or what was it? Yeah, if you were transgender, got caught with more than 3 condoms on your person, they booked you for sex.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow, that's
Even if you
crazy.
were- And this was because of a program here in the mission. The transgender person is a health outreach worker, and she had a bag of condoms, and she got arrested and booked as a sex worker.
Oh, heck no. Oh.
And even though she showed us, I'm an outreach worker.
Yeah.
I'm handing out condoms.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
crazy.
That's crazy. She had a good case though.
Somebody
She
from
could.
Ella.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and that changed the whole policy for the police department.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I would fight that case. That's crazy. All right. So the standard then is extreme hardship, and what constitutes extreme hardship, and it means it's got to be greater than the ordinary hardship that any person would suffer if their father, spouse, child were denied admission. So how do you show it? You look to some examples. All right. So you can show that your relative has a medical or a psychological condition and depends on you for care, right? You can show that your relative is financially dependent on you. You can show that your relative can't afford child care or adult care for his or her family in your absence, right? Say your spouse has a child, right? Say your spouse has a parent that your spouse looks after, right? Show that your home country is war-torn. Show that your relative has exceptionally strong emotional ties to you. Show that your relative would suffer severe depression, right? Or perhaps is suffering depression as a result of the immigration process, just at the thought of living without their spouse, right? Anything else we can think of. In other words, the idea is brainstorm. What is happening in this person's life, and what would happen if they don't grant this green card? Right, and then we put together the strongest case possible, and that's a big thing that we can help, that each of you can help with. So there are 2 standards to look out for. One is the nicer standard called showing extreme hardship to your U.S. citizen or green card holding spouse, parent, or child. Or there is the really, really nasty standard, which is the quote-unquote exceptional and extremely unusual hardship standard that basically means your person, your child is, fill in the blank, I don't know, severely autistic and depends on you for their day-to-day survival, right? If that's the truth, then you can avoid your deportation through a process called cancellation of removal. This stronger standard can win you a case in deportation proceedings. This lighter standard can get you a green card even if you're inadmissible for one. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. This stronger standard is a nasty, nasty law called cancellation of removal, and there are a bunch of other requirements, but the hardship level is the worst piece of that puzzle. Anyway, so that's complex. Add complexity to it. Some cases require different psychological evaluations to show different things in the same case, right? So you may have a single case that's applying for asylum, U visa, and cancellation of removal all at the same time. I have, I think, 5 cases where we are trying each of these things. We'll try the U visa first. If we win it, great. But if it doesn't work, we're going to go forward with asylum and cancellation in front of a judge, right? And so we've got to prepare all of them simultaneously. And so depending on how the attorney wants to address the case, you might be asked for either a single report that is multi-layered of complexity of what we need from you, or we might be asking you for 3 smaller evaluations to address 3 separate issues that we can then apply in 3 separate legal applications. Does that make sense? All right. The point is to understand clearly, so it's important to understand clearly what the attorney is trying to achieve before doing the examination. And so working with the attorney, this is sort of the last section in my slide. Yes, always include the CV, always include the resume, always include a paragraph that states your expertise, your experience, your education. The officer needs to see that you are a reputable person, right? Always include your license number and the issuing authority if they're, if applicable. Always explain how many times you've met with the client in order to, to create your opinion. Say how long you met with the client, how you gathered your opinion, and how you, quote unquote, did your stuff. If it was conducted in a foreign language, state that. If you used interpreters, state that, and get the interpreter's name and their license number if they're a court-certified interpreter, right? Then give your opinion in a clear, concise way that even untrained professionals can understand. In other words, don't use psychobabble that is difficult for immigration judges that don't have a background in this stuff, because they are looking at these cases, they're reading your evaluation along with 70 pages of other stuff that I am submitting, and they're reading it fast, right? Okay, so what to ask for from the attorney? If they've done a declaration on the case, get it first, okay? If they get it and read it. Ask the attorney for the specific type of case it is. Don't just say, hey, is this a U visa? What type of U visa? What was the crime? What happened, right? What type of asylum case is this? What happened to the applicant? What is your argument for saying that they have a well-founded fear of what persecution, right? What kind of waiver? Who's the qualifying relative? What kind of hardship? What level of hardship? What are you really asking me to show, right? Make sure to ask for a deadline. Filing deadlines are not flexible, okay? Revisions. I love it when my people that I work with ask me or give me a chance to review and make a correction or make an edit or something if I'm allowed to, right? So I would say ask the attorney for a revision, an edit, a modification after you're done with it, right? The attorney will appreciate this, and the attorney should make specific edits when it's in the best interest of the client, okay? If you're testifying in court, ask the attorney for a meeting first so that you understand what's at issue and what to expect. I think a face-to-face testimony, face-to-face with the attorney is always best, face-to-face in court is always best. They're not always the most practical. We all have busy schedules. The judges understand that. Telephonic appearances is acceptable, and it's usually more practical. But if a deportation is on the line, and if a client is willing to pay, if they're paying me top dollar, and if they're willing to pay you top dollar, it can really help their case to be in court. Okay? Do a run-through. Ask the attorney for a list of questions that he or she will ask you, and then be prepared for cross-examination, because the DHS attorney, the ICE lawyer, who's arguing to deport always, is not going to be happy if you are convincing the judge to come to the good side. So we can prepare you for that as well. I think that that's basically it. My conclusion is that you guys form a critical role in helping immigrants stay in the United States. The more attorneys and social workers work together, the better we can serve our clients. Okay?
Thank you.
So that's it.
Thank you.